So, when you think of Tasmania, you probably picture, stunning, pristine wilderness. But we're not here for a travel guide. We're here because this one island, which is really a kind of microcosm of our entire planet, is a place of these really profound contradictions. And it might just hold the keys to our collective future.
I want you to just consider this question for a second. What if the story of this one island isn't just about its past, but is actually a roadmap for all of us? It's a pretty bold idea, I know, but the evidence we're about to dig into is, well, it's incredibly compelling. Okay, so here's the island's first major paradox. On one hand, you've got Cape Grim, which is a scientific baseline station breathing what is literally the cleanest air on the planet. But then, on the other hand, you have the town of Queenstown, where a century of copper smelting stripped the hills so bare they created this bizarre, man-made moonscape. You've got absolute purity and staggering pollution right there, side by side. And then there's the human paradox. I mean, Tasmania is home to the Palawa people, who represent one of the longest continuous cultures on the entire planet. And yet, in just a single generation, modern Tasmania flipped from having the absolute harshest anti-gay laws in the Western world to having the most progressive. That's deep, deep time meeting dizzying, unbelievable speed. To really get our heads around Tasmania, and maybe even ourselves, we have to understand two completely different kinds of time. First, there's the deep ecological clock, the one that breathes with the seasons, the one humanity lived by for tens of thousands of years. And then there's the modern technological clock, the one that just ticks faster and faster and faster. So let's start by exploring that first clock, the 65,000-year clock. This is a story all about resilience, rooted in the incredible history of the Palawa people. Just let that number sink in for a minute. 65,000 years. No, that is not a typo. While entire civilizations were rising and falling all across the globe, one continuous cultural thread was being woven right here. It's one of the oldest on record anywhere. Now, what's absolutely wild about this is how they survived. During the last ice age, Tasmania was basically an Antarctic outpost, and the Palawa people endured it with no modern insulation. They didn't have clothes, they adapted biologically with higher metabolisms, and used this amazing biotechnology of ochre and grease. They were essentially tropical primates who hacked a frozen climate. Their whole world was just fundamentally different from ours. Forget the 40-hour workweek. They practiced what some have called the original affluent society, working maybe 20 hours to get everything they needed. Time wasn't a number on a clock. It was the migration of mutton birds. And their memory? It was so precise that their oral stories accurately describe the flooding of the land bridge to Australia, which happened 12,000 years ago. And here's something really profound. Their social logic was completely different. There was no law in a book that said, okay, you're an adult at 18. Adulthood was a state of being, a readiness that you had to prove through skill, through maturity, through trials. It wasn't about how many years you'd been alive, but about whether you were ready to sustain the community. Okay, deep breath. Now, let's switch clocks. Welcome to the 200-year stack, the dizzying, chaotic speed of right now. So the stack, it's this fragile tower of technologies we all now depend on just to survive. When you look at it backwards like this, you can really see the exponential compression. Each one of these layers was a fundamental phase shift in human consciousness. It was a point of no return that made the world that came before it seem completely alien. Let's just run through a few of these shifts real quick. In 1826, two things happened. The friction match basically democratized fire, and the first photograph froze a moment in time forever. Think about that. Before this, memory was a purely internal, subjective thing. And suddenly, boom, it could be externalized. Fast forward to 1924. The BBC begins broadcasting its time signal, those little pips. A tiny, seemingly innocent event, right? But it was the moment humanity officially outsourced its sense of time from the sun and the seasons to a centralized machine. You could say that's the day ecological time died. And then, of course, a shift we all remember. 2007, the iPhone. This was the arrival of the external brain. It was an invention that effectively made boredom and solitude optional for the first time in human history. And in doing so, it fundamentally started rewiring our minds. So we have these two clocks, one ancient and slow, one terrifyingly fast. How in the world do they connect? Well, there's this fascinating and, yeah, pretty speculative hypothesis that tries to unify everything. Let's call it the singularity. It all starts with this radical geological theory about one of Tasmania's most famous landmarks, Lake Pedder. The idea is that it wasn't formed slowly over millennia, but in an instant. An object from space slams into the shallow ocean, the water vaporizes, and the explosive force literally pushes the seabed up, creating the landscape we see today. And the proof? Some very unique geology and the presence of Darwin glass, which is a substance only formed by meteorite impacts.
This is where it gets really interesting, because this theory connects the ancient past to a quantum future. It argues that the Palawa way of thinking is structurally identical to the logic of future technologies. It's like a mirror. Their cyclical, sun-tied view of time reflects the complex, multidimensional way that quantum systems understand time. It's the same pattern, just playing out on a completely different scale.
And the core idea is really this. The Palawa's first great technology was fire, an external form of combustion. The ultimate goal of modern physics is fusion, an internal form of atomic resonance. You see? It's not a straight line of progress. It's a full-circle journey, coming back to the same fundamental principles, but with brand new tools.
So what does all of this actually mean for us, right now? Well, it all builds into a potential blueprint for tomorrow, with Tasmania as a real working model. The result is this pretty radical plan for Tasmania's future. We're talking decentralized towns built with 3D printers, powered by cold fusion reactors sitting in old mines, an economy driven by wealth from sustainably extracting minerals using sound waves, and even a whole new kind of tourism using augmented reality to hunt from meteor fragments. It's a complete synthesis of ancient stewardship and quantum tech. In this model, Tasmania stops being just a remote outpost. It becomes the central laboratory, the balanced tipping point where humanity learns how to integrate its deep, deep past with its technological destiny. And that leaves us with this final, really provocative question. Could this one small island truly be the place where we figure it all out, where the breathing clock and the ticking clock are finally synchronized? It's a lot to think about, and it suggests that maybe the edge of the world is actually the center of the new one.